Welcome back to the 7-Stage LSAT podcast. I am your returning host, Alex. Sasha, I'm joined by, not to jump the gun, but I am joined by a wonderful 7-Stage tutor, Sasha. Sasha, do you want to say hello to the audience?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Alex, for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about my LSAT journey and everything that we're going to get into.
Yeah, and just an announcement to all of the fans at home. Millions, I'm guessing. Haven't looked at the numbers. I'm guessing we're in the millions. We are sort of shifting gears a little bit. The weekly podcast is going to be more like narrative driven with 7-Sage tutors and students. So we're going to be basically talking to people about their LSAT journeys, what worked, what didn't. Hopefully there's a lot of value for everyone at home. And then we're going to be starting a daily podcast series as well. That's more of the nuts and bolts, much shorter form, but answering questions and going through the nuts and bolts of the LSAT. So that's the shift we're doing. We're trying it out. Hopefully people like it. And I look forward to being back in the mix. But Sasha, it's very exciting to have you on as the first guest in this new era of the 7-Stage LSAT podcast.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited to be here. I can honestly say that I listened to the 7-Sage podcast throughout my journey, and continue to listen to not all, but most of the 7-Sage podcasts to this day. Find them not only informative but engaging and entertaining.
That's great. Glad to hear that. Well, so pleased we could get you on. Well, let's start just by hearing, when did you start thinking about or let's go through the stats first. What was your diagnostic? Just so people know, it'll probably be in the title, but
Sure.
what was your diagnostic and what did you end up with on official score?
Yeah, so I started out diagnostic at a 151. That was in September, and then my final official score in June was a 175.
Got it. So what is that? 8 or 9 months? 9 months about?
Yeah,
From beginning to end. Sorry, what'd you say it was? 170 what?
175.
175, 151 to 175. That's a very sizable jump. So that's great. I'm sure there's a lot of people at home who are looking for a similar leap. So hopefully there's a lot to glean from Sasha's story. But let's go back. Yeah, when did you decide that you wanted to go to law school, be a lawyer? What was your path like to that point?
Yeah, well, I will say it wasn't traditional. I wasn't trying to be a lawyer coming out of undergrad. I was working in sports. I mean, that was the industry I was working in. And basically, in the summer before I started studying, in about July or August.
What were you doing in sports? I just want to know now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I was working both as a basketball coach professionally and in college, and also within sports organizations. So I worked as like a general manager for a professional basketball team in England, and then I was a college basketball coach in Boston. So I was working in the basketball field, did that throughout undergrad as well, and really enjoyed it. But I had a sort of, in the summer before I started studying, wanted to sort of figure out a new path for myself for a variety of reasons. Actually did one of those like kind of career aptitude tests or kind of personality aptitude tests. And lawyer was like far and away the highest thing that came up on the list. And it sort of made sense considering the types of books I read, the things that I'm interested, certainly intellectually, and the skill sets that I put. So I decided to really commit myself. When I decided in August, I was like, okay, I'm going to start studying in September. And one of the things I brought with me from my sports and basketball background was knowing how to kind of schedule my time management, knowing, how I needed to break down what a study week looked like. Even though I didn't know how to study for the LSAT specifically, I knew that I had to be disciplined and I had to be keeping myself to a schedule in the same way that I had in my previous roles. So that's how I started. And really, keeping that discipline from the beginning is what I think is what really was able to push me through for 9 months, pretty much.
That's awesome. I really like when people are able to like kind of connect the things that work for them elsewhere or the skill sets that have served them elsewhere and apply them to the LSAT. I don't know if that's something that you see with your students as well or look for.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's I think there's sort of 2 elements to that, right? So there's the first element of that is I always try to just get a somewhat of a sense of the types of things that students are interested in, right? That my clients are interested in, and connecting passages or stimuli to their own life or the things that they're interested in, and such that it can make, for example, a reading comprehension passage that's about something boring seem more interesting, but also make a stimulus more easily understandable. But the second element is also, almost every single person I work with clearly is motivated, clearly has some degree of intrinsic discipline and desire, and has done that in one way or another, whether that be as a student, whether that be as a professional, right? And it's to some extent applying those same skills that they've used maybe as a paralegal, as a student, in my case, as a coach, right? Into studying and trying to gain, maybe you're not going to love it the same way, but certainly applying the same approach or a similar approach to the studying itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of people oftentimes bemoan the fact that the LSAT seems unrelated to law, which I would push back on. I actually think it is pretty related, in terms of the what it's testing you on. Certainly, it's not about the law. It is not like there's no you're not gonna. But so I understand that frustration, but I think a much more productive way of approaching it is actually just looking for the commonalities between this task and other tasks in your life. I think sports is one that comes up a lot for me. I feel like the LSAT is much more akin to like training for a sport than it is for most like knowledge based tests.
Absolutely, and I think in part because the LSAT is not like, biology, where you're studying these different sort of and you're memorizing, not that there's no memorizing in the LSAT studying, but as opposed to a subject base, as you were talking about, how you're memorizing things and applying them. In the case of the LSAT, it's so much more about the process, such that you become better at pattern recognition. And like you said, with sports, there's a real component of that. When I was working as a coach, it was less about, okay, we're going to be memorizing these different things, but it's more being willing to do the same sort of process each and every day and building up our skills week by week. That has a kind of crossover similarity to the test.
Yeah, especially basketball. For whatever reason, basketball also feels like I don't know. I remember like thinking about how like in basketball, like I mean, certainly there's some times where you're like the play you're run also, I never played basketball, so this is totally yeah, I might be totally off base, but from, a layman's, perspective, like, there isn't as much like the play like plays in basketball are much less concealed than they are in, say, football, but it's about, like, execution, right? It's about, it's like in football, they're not just gonna hold up a finger to say, like, "This is what play we're gonna run," like, it's very complex cryptology to keep those things secret. But it is just like it's about repetition and execution and creating advantages for yourself. Which not to get too into the weeds here, but like that's what the LSAT is about. Like it is like it's just about like you don't know what the conditions are going to be on the day exactly. It's just it's looking for processes and workflows that you can repeat and employ when it comes to the official test day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think one of the things I emphasize to my clients, and one of the things I had to learn when I was studying, right, is you might have a good instinct on a particular question or questions that allow you to get the right answer a handful of times. But that's not really what we can rely on, because on test day, right, you might not get that type of topic or question that's going to play to your strengths. So instead, we need to have a process, a way in which we do things that, like you said, create advantages for yourself, such that you're A, not overwhelmed, and B, you have a pretty clear understanding of how am I going to predict the answer choice? How am I going to go through this process of elimination? That's really going to put you in the best place, as opposed to I'm just going to rely on my sort of feel for this. Unless you're like, born with LSAT knowledge, most of us can't just like feel out a test.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, let's get back into your story. So you you decided to take the leap. And what was that? How did you do a lot of research? Did you like think that this process was going to be way simpler than it was? That's a common theme. So you won't be an outlier if that's the case. Like, what was the first step for you?
Yeah, the first step for me was, well, of course, taking the diagnostic, and then the second step was figuring out what was the curriculum that I was gonna use to help me, get through this? Because I knew, right, I was sort of, at a score that was good, but it wasn't where I wanted to be, and that I really needed to make sure I learned a lot more. Because honestly, I can remember taking the diagnostic and how confused I was even at some of the questions, right? And so even just learning that basic skill was gonna be relevant.
Did you
Um
take it with logic games or was this after?
this was after Logic
Okay.
Games, yeah,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
even confused what does it mean when you say flaw in the argument? Like, I didn't know what a premise was, I didn't know what a conclusion was, right? And so, I certainly in the context of the test. And so, after doing a lot of research, I came upon Seven Sage. I really liked sort of the intro videos and how they broke it down. And so I basically looked through the Seven Sage curriculum. I saw how many hours there were. I knew that I wanted to spend a lot of time studying. I wasn't trying to rush into applying. I wanted to basically give myself enough time to get to a goal score as opposed to a goal month to take the test. And so I basically broke it down by saying, okay, how long is it going to take me to get through this curriculum? And then I'm going to go through the curriculum. I'm going to create a schedule for myself week by week, and then I'm going to take another diagnostic in the sense that it's seeing where I am after I've gone through the curriculum, and then reassess and create a study plan for myself based on how much I've improved and where I still need to improve after going through the curriculum.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. What was the experience? Take us just through because it's an experience that everyone has who takes this test. Like, you alluded to it a bit, but like just sitting down and taking that diagnostic, were you shaken? Were you?
Yes, I was 100% shaken. I mean, I think the first thing was I was okay. At least I know that I can do this, that I can sit down for whatever it is, like almost 3 hours. But it was incredibly intimidating. I mean, again, there was the part about just not even understanding always what the questions were asking me. But also the timing factor. I couldn't believe how much, I had to do in 35 minutes. It was something that, I really had done no research into the test itself, the nature of the test itself before I took the diagnostic, because I wanted to just see literally what is the place I am at, from a complete base standpoint. And, that was the score I got, and I thought honestly, I felt a little bit like, I'm surprised, that I was able to get there because it was such an intimidating experience. I can remember exactly where I was, and I think I came out of it feeling like, "Okay, I have a lot of work to do," and I'm actually excited to get that work started.
And everyone does, you know? I mean, it's like there's a lot of work to do no matter what. But but yeah, I mean, that's the right approach, right? And it's something you hear, I don't know how often you hear it. I've heard it many times where people are like, I've been studying for a while or maybe even not that long, but they've been studying before they take their diagnostic. They're like, I just want to I they kind of see the diagnostic as almost they don't wanna burn the diagnostic, like, they wanna be in a good place to take the diagnostic, and it is just, like, humble yourself in front of the d f before the diagnostic, like, it is there, it is a humbling experience, but, like, that baseline is really important, and, like, I don't know your feelings, but for me, it's like, if you study for a few months and then take the diagnostic, like, that is a waste of time. You've just wasted a few months, and, alright, if this is you, good news is, doesn't matter. Let's move forward and it's fine. Like nothing is lost. But if you're at the beginning and you're wondering what to do, just sit down and take the diagnostic. The other thing is because it gives you the baseline. It lets you know like what your strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, as you said too, like no matter what your score is, you should come out of that feeling like, okay, I can do this because no matter what score you got on the diagnostic, what you've just proven to yourself is that you can sit through a full test and you can do it. So, and that's no easy task. So, that's great. And then the other thing is like the longer you wait to take a diagnostic, the more intimidating it is. And the more like I feel like there's some number where once you get past that, like it stretches out even further. Like I've seen people who've been studying for so long before taking that diagnostic because it just gets harder and harder to sit down. Um, because it's like you've been studying, so you really don't want to see a low score. So I mean, not to harp on that, but I think there's a lot of value in just getting that out of the way right at the beginning as you should.
Absolutely, and I think that The other thing is that the diagnostic, right, is simply or functionally, it's simply an introduction to what it means to be an LSAT taker, right? To be somebody who's taking the LSAT, right? And you don't in some ways, again, at first for people who are just starting out, you don't want to sully that experience. It's an important first step for you to be able to move forward is to say, okay, I am an LSAT taker. I have taken the diagnostic. I'm starting the process. It's step one. And I think that's, as we're going to get into, this is like my overall whole philosophy with the LSAT. It's about the process more than it is about the result. And being able to do that that all starts with the diagnostic.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so you took the diagnostic,
Yeah.
started shopping around. What were you looking for in a curriculum?
I was looking for a well-organized curriculum that I could use, and be able to, like, match my calendar with. So, like, I knew my work schedule, right? I could say, "All right, foundations lesson, what 1 is gonna take 5 hours," and so I know that I'm gonna need I have 2 hours this day, 1 hour the next day, and, 2 hours the next day. So I know that this module is gonna take me 3 days, right? So, I needed something really well organized. I needed something I knew I wanted something that was highly touted. And at this, 7 Sage was highly touted. I was deep into the Reddit forum, all of that. And so those were the two big things. I needed something organized. I needed something that was well regarded. And I needed something that included not only just explanation videos, but included practice throughout. And that included in the foundations, those skill builders. My God, how helpful those skill builders were, right? With the forcing you to not just okay, I'm passively watching this video, but I'm actively applying it, right? And it made it feel like it was a real class, like I was back in school. It'd been a while since I'd been in school. And so it really, I was looking for a resource that wasn't just explaining things to me, but was forcing me to apply them, right? And then lastly, the community. Right, and I think that's so important because underneath every video, and this was something that was sort of shocked me. Underneath every video, there is comments, there are explanations, there are analyses from tutors, other people studying, right? And also there's forums. There's like the Discord forums. There are the discussions going on in the chat part of the website, which looks slightly different now, but is essentially roughly the same thing. Um, that community, being able to bounce ideas off of, I wrapped myself in that from the beginning. So that was how Seven Sage jumped out for me. It had all of the components of what basically sort of felt like a virtual classroom, like I was back in undergrad in my favorite classes.
The platform has only gotten more robust in terms of the, community, resources. It's a huge part, and we're rolling out new features all the time. I know we have a feature coming out where you can I can't remember what it's called, but um you can, study together, via voice, without leaving, the website. So that should hopefully be here, in the not too distant future. So we're just every day, it's a very important part of the platform. It's something that we see as very important, and so it's, like, continuously where a lot of focus goes.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Listen, I found study partners at each stage of my journey, via the 7 Sage platform. I really didn't even look anywhere else. I mean,
Mm,
that's where I found it. You can find people who are at your stage. You can find people who are slightly ahead of you, which can be helpful in of itself. And at each point, I found people that really helped me through that journey. And even if I wasn't in a study group, again, those comments of, "Wow, somebody else is going through the same problem I am. Here's the response from one of the tutors," right? And I can actually see maybe not just the explanation video, but somebody who had already commented an issue that I was having.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, and it makes it feel a little bit less, lonely and a little bit more doable. Well, someone has been through this before, someone has I mean, when you pull up those questions, it's like you see every question under the sun. So it's just like, okay, like chances are someone has the exact same question that I do, which is great. So, okay, so you start going through the core curriculum. How much time did you spend there?
The core curriculum, well, I mean, I went through the whole core curriculum, and that probably took me um about a month, maybe a little bit longer of time, to get through the whole core curriculum. I was taking notes throughout, practicing sort of, doing the skill builders and whatnot, sometimes doing the skill builders 2 times or 3 times. So that took me about a month, and then I took another diagnostic at the end of the core curriculum, and did see a little bit of a score jump after that, and then sort of decided to organize uh, my studying somewhat around this new test and figuring out, okay, what things am I going to really focus on?
So, how long were you studying a day at that point? What was your schedule like?
So at that point, I was probably studying maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. And it was about 5 to 6 days a week. I always made sure to have a day off throughout the week, which I think is essential. You don't wanna get burned out. But I was studying about 2 to 3 hours a day, and one of the things that made a key difference about halfway through going through the core curriculum is I stopped splitting up the studying, like maybe 1 hour at this point and another hour at this point. I just sat down, put my phone out of the room, and did 2 to 3 hours straight because tested. I started to see that advice, on the forums, and so I started to do that. So it was about 2 to 3 hours a day, again, about 6 days a week, and then once I finished the core curriculum, I had a slightly different schedule, but roughly the same amount of time that I was spending each day.
And where did you go from there? What were the next steps? So you're done with the core curriculum.
Yeah.
How did your like drilling and what did the process look like from there? So
Yeah.
that was like about 1 month in.
Yeah, it was about a little bit like maybe like the into the second week of October at that point. Yeah. And so at that point, I'm looking at my new diagnostic or the next step, next practice test. And I'm looking at, okay, so here are certain question types I'm really struggling with, right? And so I remember I was like very much struggling with like most strongly supported questions and sufficient assumption questions. And so I decided, okay, these are the modules that I'm gonna rewatch, right? Because clearly something didn't stick with me about these question types, right? And so I was focused a lot on LR, especially in those first months after that, and just whatever like my highest priority question types, not as much the sort of you know overall reasonings like causal reasoning or conditional reasoning, but focusing very specifically, okay, what are the question types I'm struggling with? I'd go through the module, then I would do drills untimed, and then I would do them timed once I started to feel comfortable with that. Right? And then throughout the week, I'd make sure I got in like a section of LR, a section of RC each week. And then every other week, I was making sure I did a practice test.
Great. So it might be useful. What score did you get on that second diagnostic?
Yeah, the second diagnostic was like a 157, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, if
And
I'm
how did you
remembering
feel
exactly
about that?
correctly. So I had mixed emotions. Part
Yeah.
of me wanted to be further along. Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Yeah.
sort of like I went through this whole process, I just spent a month studying, I wanted to be further along. At the same time, there was significant progress. One of the things that I found was I finished every section, which was like a huge difference from I think on the initial diagnostic, I had left like 3 or 4 questions in 2 of the sections, blank, right? Because I just didn't have enough time. So seeing that because I could recognize the question types, right? I could actually get through the section, that was a big plus, right? And I think that was the basic reason why my score jumped, right? Even just that very small thing, right? But it also, again, I think at that point was when I really sat back and came to realize, okay, this is really going to take a while. Like this isn't going to be something that I can rush through. I'd already known that to some extent, but it's another thing to say, wow, I just studied for a month and 2 weeks, and I went up 5 points, right, or 6 points, right? And so that is a whole different experience and knowing, okay, like I have a lot more cut out for me, and I need to start to get really like focused in the ways that I'm gonna approach this. And that's when I really started to go in to the 7 stage forums and figuring out, okay, what are some other study strategies that I would find really helpful. And that's when I was like kind of adjusting the study plan around what I really needed to be doing.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's important to note that it's like, yeah, I mean, you after you get through the core curriculum, you might feel a little bit like you probably will feel like you're not and if you're exactly where you want to be, great, that's awesome. But I don't exactly remember what my score was after I got through the core curriculum, but it wasn't it wasn't what I ended up with. It wasn't what, my so it's like you can feel like you've just gone through this like huge task, this full curriculum. So you feel like, I should be like really I'm fully formed as an LSAT student, but you're not. I mean, it's just like you've just learned to go back to sports. It's like you've learned the fundamentals, you've learned the rules. You haven't started like playing. Like you haven't started playing the game yet. Like you have like that is such a huge part of learning anything. You have to start doing it. So um yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can relate to that.
Yeah, no, 100%, and I think, that was because so much of the curriculum is untimed work, right? And so that's another thing, right? So as you're going through the curriculum, you're learning, like you say, the very base level of what you need to know, but I also came to learn not to be afraid to go back to it, right? And so to say, if I am struggling on a particular question type, if I'm struggling on a particular type of logic, right? So conditional reasoning or something like that, don't be afraid to go back to conditional and set logic and logic of intersecting sets. Like those modules can be helpful now that you've seen more questions, you have a little bit of a better idea, and actually some of the things that you maybe glossed over when I was watching it the first time make a lot more sense, right? What a superset is, what a subset is, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, it's and like the I think that's important to use that like the core curriculum doesn't go away. Like it's not you don't just move on and it's there for you. You should be returning to it. Um oh, I remember what I was going to say. Basically like I think sometimes people can hear like, "Oh, you spent 9 months studying for this," and be sort of like, "Oh my gosh, like I that's a lot." And it is a lot. But I also think like in your story there's another thing which is like, listen, not everyone has the same goals. Like, you just have to be realistic about this. Like, if you want to get where Sasha ended up, then it will probably take a long time, right? It's in the 99th percentile of all test takers. Like to get in the 99th percentile of almost anything, like it takes a lot of effort. Um, if your goal score but your goal score doesn't have to be that. And if your goal score is you know, in the upper 150s, which is a perfectly reasonable goal score depending on what it is you want, where you want to go, the scholarships you want, like, but it's totally viable, then like, or in the 160s, then it's not going to take as long. I just think it's something important to acknowledge because people should not have the same goal scores. You don't need to do as much if you have okay. I am targeting this school for this reason, and their medians are this. Like, I just need to get above that. Like, the timeline. It depends on what you want, right?
Absolutely. And I think on both a micro scale and a macro scale, be realistic about what you want, what your goals are, and how much time you have, right? So for example, I knew that I did have 4 hours to study after work, all right? But I only gave myself 2 to 3 most of the time because I you never know. Something can take longer than you think it will, right? And so both on the micro scale and the macro scale, be realistic about what your goals are and how much time you have to accomplish them.
Yeah. People almost always, I think, tr- they underestimate how long it's going to take to get where they want to go. And there's the instinct to rush this. I mean, when I thought about taking this test, or actually when I started studying for it, I was like, I want to take it like as soon as possible. And to me, that meant like I didn't even know how it worked. So I was like, I assume they offer it multiple times a month, like and so it's just like I'll take it in a few weeks. I just didn't have any idea. Even after I investigated and found out what it was, like this was late in the cycle, and I was like, I want to apply for next year. I want to start as soon as possible. I didn't end up doing that, and it's like when I see people in that situation, it's like the timeline you're talking about now, the difference of like a year is so insignificant when you look at your life and your professional life when you're 10 years down the road. Like you will not be thinking about, oh, did I start with the class of 20, that did I matriculate in fall 2026 or fall 2027? Like it doesn't matter. It only matters in that if you wait a year, you're oftentimes in a much better shape. So, you know, but I guess you giving yourself that long runway is something that I don't hear a lot, but is is great.
No, and it's something that I talk about with my clients, certain my clients that are unsure about when they want to take it, and I actually think that that's a good place to be in because I think it's better again to have a goal score as opposed to a goal month. Uh, there's certainly not a goal month that's 2 months away, right? And I think that, giving yourself that space, it also does to a certain degree take away the sort of intrinsic pressure and anxiety that comes from, "Oh my god, I have 3 weeks until the test and I need to somehow make a jump," right? And so, just in that sense, I think always having as much as is possible, looking for a goal score as opposed to a goal month has real positives to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go back to so in the drilling, take me through from like the
Yep.
drilling. How many times did you take the test officially?
I officially took the test 3 times. So I took it in, January, April, and June. I was living abroad at the time, so the international test dates are less frequent, so I only those were really the only 3 I could take it in the year. And I was in Spain at that time, actually, but the, uh the January test was actually I decided to schedule it knowing that for me, it was actually about I knew that it probably wasn't gonna get to my goal score, but I needed to know what the experience of taking the test was like, right? And I knew that I might have some test anxiety. I hadn't taken a standardized test since high school, right?
Most
And
people don't. It's not,
Right, exactly. Who takes standardized tests and, as like a hobby. Um, so I scheduled the January test on the recommendation of a lot of different people that I should just do it. A, because it gave it sort of, okay, this is something that I have coming up, and to be able to get through the experience of this is what test day looks like. And frankly, I can't say how important that was. I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but like going through the test day experience the January test did not go well. I scored lower than I had been scoring, and it was in huge part because I was doing it remotely. I was anxious about the environment I was in and all of that, and that helped me be way more prepared for the time in which I was, at a goal score that I felt that I could accomplish on test day.
Yeah, I've come around on this. I used to be very opposed to people taking official tests before they are, what we recommend, which is still, I think, ideal. But what we recommend is like wait until you're getting practice tests above your goal score, and then take the test if you have a timeline that allows for it. And I used to just be pretty dogmatic about that. I've been around this test for long enough now to know that one, like people don't do that. People really are they're like they want to take the test, they wanna take it as soon as possible, and 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 oftentimes the rationale is like, "Well, who knows, like, I might get it," and it's like, that's almost never happens, but that's fine. No harm in that. But 2, like, I do think people do like, getting one under your belt can be very beneficial. So, like, if you don't need to do that, it's certainly, like, I don't think you should do that, but it's also not the worst thing in the world. I used to be much more like, "No, don't do it," and now I'm like, yeah, there's some people where it's like, listen, they just really, really wanna take that official test, and it's not the end of the world. I mean, it is money, and it is, like, a disruption in your schedule, and like, there's it's not nothing, but, like, I do think there can be value. I have seen people take an official test and just kinda get it under their belt, and it's certainly not what they want it to be, but it is a useful experience just like the diagnostic is and everything else.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I went into it knowing that it wasn't for the score, it was for the experience of taking it, and as a tutor now on the other side of it, I do not recommend this to clients unless there's somebody who, again, has this long runway, right? So
Yeah,
if
yeah, yeah,
somebody
it's
eh
totally.
right,
Good
right,
point.
if somebody is like, "Oh, I've taken it already twice," like, I'm not gonna tell them to just take it a 3rd time, or somebody who has, like, a short runway, like, they're choosing between October and November, right? Because they've, like, made up their mind that those are the ones that they're gonna take it. I'm not gonna tell them to do both, right? But I think if you are somebody that has started and you know that you're gonna have a long runway, and you know that you might have test anxiety, it can be a useful tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, that would really like, my recommendation would uh, if it's not the first one you've ever taken, then I'm like, don't take it unless you're ready. Also, the latest test that you can, are able to take, and that won't put you in a place where you like stop studying until then is the best. one to take. Like, if I'm studying right now and I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna take the test in 14 months," like, that's not that helpful because I'm not gonna consistently study for all that time. But if I'm deciding between, you know, September and October, I mean, and it genuinely doesn't matter, then October is like, from here, you have enough time to make that change. But anyways, the principle is later is almost always better.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I know from the questions you answered beforehand that like review was a big part of your studying. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It is the thing that I attribute my growth in this test to, more than anything. It's when I started reviewing in an intentional and thorough way that I actually started to see improvement. Um, and the analogy I use for my clients and the analogy that I sort of, ended up using for myself while I was studying is to think of studying as if you're like cleaning a pot or a pan or something with a sponge, right? And okay, so I clean the pot, right? If I don't wring out that sponge, when I go on to the next pan, right? Just kind of dirtying it up. I haven't cleaned, right? And so think of each question that way, or that's the way I thought of each question, right? If I haven't completely wrung out this question and can tell you for sure why I can tell you for sure not only why C is correct, right? But why A, B, uh, what did I say? C, A, B, D, and E are wrong, right? And emphatically wrong, right? And until I can do that, I like that question has not been cleaned and I can't put it away, right? And that was like once I started doing that, and it meant that I was actually getting a less quantity of questions per day, right? But I felt like the quality was way higher, and that, like, process is really what started to work for me. I personally didn't keep a wrong answer journal, but it was sort of along those lines, right? Of reviewing in that thorough, direct way, and I even started to do, and this is where the sort of when I made the jump into the highest tier, was I started doing something at the end of each week where I would take every single question, both RC and LR, that I had gotten wrong or flagged throughout that week, right? I would manually put it into a drill. I would do them again untimed. I knew what the answer was, but that wasn't the question. I was asking myself, honestly, do you remember why B was correct, and do you remember why the other ones were wrong? And if you don't, guess what? You gotta review it again, you gotta clean it again. It's not fully clean, right? It's not ready to go back in the cabinet. And so that was, like, the process that I can't tell you how passionate I am about it and how much I like to my clients, I say, you know, you can do 4 sections in 2 days, right? That's wonderful, right? But if you're just doing it over and over again, you haven't actually grown, you haven't actually learned, right? And I always thought about with my players when I was coaching, like, we watch film for a reason, right? And we review what we did wrong. And so I just having that intentional and thorough process was the thing that made the difference for me and the thing I've seen make the difference for my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that image too of like you're sort of dirtying up the next question. To me, I think about it as like if I don't review a question, I am wasting it. Like I'm throwing away something. It's like you've eaten like just the skin off of a chicken breast and then you're tossing it, right? But because there's so much more meat there. There's so much more to be clean. But I like what you're saying because it's not just like, okay, I haven't gained from it. It's actually I've ended up in a worse place. I am taking I'm taking habits that are bad or I'm taking an understanding that is flawed and bringing it and contaminating the next question. So I think that's a great point. It's not just that I'm throwing away something that's valuable. It's that I'm actually actively taking away from the next questions that I'm going to approach.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that people, or certainly my clients, I've emphasized to my clients, right, is that within each question, it's not only important that, oh, I figured out, okay, this answer choice is correct, but there are probably one or two answer choices there that are traps that you might see, or you certainly will see in a future. In a future question, and making sure that you're really uh, staying on top of the fact that you can identify those traps.
Okay, so well, that's great. Thank you so much. I think that like hearing about your studies, I just think it's a very relatable story. I'm wondering like what lessons how you apply the lessons that you learn to your clients, to the students you work with now.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing that I like to do is as you can see, I talk about review a lot. That's the thing I emphasize with my client. Is I literally bring it up in our first intro session almost every time. I ask, I like to ask my clients how they've been studying so far, and just talking, emphasizing how we can actually be going slower a little bit and higher quality. But I also, and I think we addressed this a little bit, I love to talk to my clients about, being realistic about their schedule and their calendar and being disciplined about knowing how much time they really have to study and being honest with themselves. If they like, I always say, if you're not a calendar person now, this is the time to become one, right? If you're not a schedule person now, like this is the time, because you got to be honest. And so much of this test is being really honest with yourself about what you don't understand, and not like sort of glazing over the things that are just sort of sitting there for you.
Absolutely, definitely. Well, so what's next for you? I mean, I know you're waiting on decisions, but what kind of law do you wanna practice? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so I mean, there are basically 2 areas of law that I'm most interested in, and they have some relationship to each other. So from my time working in sports, contract law is I'm fascinated by, huge part of the business of it. I worked partially in that, for a period of time. But since I have, you know, finished my applications, almost every book I've read has been constitutional law and from constitutional scholars, and find it completely intellectually fascinating. I studied history in undergraduate, so it's from a historical perspective, something that I really love. So that's also been something that I'm super excited to learn about. With that being said, I'm really excited to go to school. I think more than anything, I'm excited to go to school and learn new things.
School's awesome, which is crazy to say. Definitely not something I would have said when I was a child. But, but yeah, that's great. Well, that's very exciting, and thank you so much, for joining us. I think, there's a lot for students to get out of that. I mean, one, just, like, I think the consistency and the perseverance and uh, are like, this is all doable, you know? It requires a lot, but it's also things that everyone has, right? It's discipline, but, like, that's not the same thing as, like, I don't know, vertical leap. Like, some people have it or not. Like, discipline is something that you can cultivate, that you can, practice. So, like, everything that you talk about is something that everyone has access to. It's not like you're not sugarcoating how long it took. You're not sugarcoating how much work you put into it. You're not sugarcoating how, like, the review part of it, like, it's not fun. Like, it is not the most fun part of this, but, like, it is so important. So I think your story is one that's very relatable and very, I would say, inspiring, because I think it speaks to how, the tools that got you from a 151 to a 175 are tools that everyone can tap into. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Sasha. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And on a sort of lighter note, just to point out to people, one of the small things I always say: when you finish studying, do something positive. Give
Yeah.
yourself a reward.
Yeah.
For me, it was playing basketball or like having candy, and like
Yeah.
literally. And so it's speaking of sugar coating, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard, and because it's really hard, reward yourself. It's something that's really important. And again, thank you so much, Alex, for having me on. This was awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sasha. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Yeah. Take care.